I didn't post last week's. Shabana's going to shoot me.
Mm.
Oh, well. Let's see.
I don't see Shabana.
No, I don't see her yet either.
I think she's away. She's with her son and somewhere. So I think she's on the journey. So that's why she's not here.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Hello, everyone. This is Nanette Kennedy with Humanity's Team in the Evolution Revolution. We are reading The Essential Path by Neil Donald Walsh, his latest book. And we are on chapter 19, The Curiosities. And Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll just start. As people come in, we'll say hello.
Okay. Okay, so this is The Essential Path. Chapter 19, The Curiosities. Fair question time. If we really are spiritual beings manifesting physically, where does one soul end and another begin? Is the soul sharply defined and abruptly edged, identifiable by its limits and shapes, as is the body? If two souls, however, together in the firmament, if two souls hover together in the firmament, is there a space where the first soul exists and the second soul exists? If so, what's between them? What is the substance that separates them? Could it be that there is no substance that separates them, but only a substance that connects them, being simply a different vibration of the same substance of which they are made? When you walk from one room of our house into another, where precisely does the air of the first room end and the air of the second room begin? At the exact nanosecond that the clock strikes midnight, is it the end of one day or the start of another? What is this place in time and space called? Both and? What happened to either or? Could it be that when the energy that I call the essential essence is coalesced, differentiated, or delineated, we call it a soul, and that when it is simply present in an undifferentiated, non-localized, non-concentrated form, we call it all that is? Could it be that the soul is both singular and plural? Could it be that it is both permeable and impermeable, unduplicated in its singularity? There are no two snowflakes alike, and no two souls alike. And yet duplicating at the most fundamental level the singularity itself? Could it be that the soul is receiving energy from all around it and sending energy to all around it? Could it be that what we call life is nothing more, and miracle of miracles nothing less, than a constant, never-ending process of energy exchange between all the elements of life? Is the mechanism that runs the cosmos the same as the mechanism that runs life in all of its forms, even its submolecular form? Is the system in which we live a system operating on a singular energy that permeates everyone and is therefore usable by everyone? Could it be that God, life's pure, undifferentiated energy, was always intended to be used to serve our purposes rather than we being used to serve God's? Or to be more complete with this thought, that the two are actually one, since we are all one and we just don't know it? What if God's job is not to tell us what to do, but empower us to do what we want to do? Could this be why the world is the way it is? Is it possible that God is empowering us to make our collective choices, giving us the freedom to evolve or devolve as we wish? If we don't want a world in which 653 children die every hour of starvation, do we not have the power to change that through collective action and with our collective resources? If we don't want a world in which 1.7 billion do not have access to a drop of clean water, do we not have the power to change that through collective action and with our collective resources? If we do not want a world in which 1.6 billion people do not have electricity and 2.5 billion people, a third of the human race, still live without toilets, do we not have the power to change that through collective action and with our collective resources? It is our species that permits these and other conditions of our collective suffering to exist. God has given us the power to collectively alter these conditions and elevate our civilization to new levels. We are simply not choosing to use that power. If we did, we could change things easily. If we can send a man to the moon, if we can decode the human genome, if we can clone sheep and other mammals, and soon humans, we can stop 650 plus children an hour from dying of starvation. We can stop all human preventable suffering. We simply have to embrace who we really are. Does this all sound too fanciful, too improbable, or too contradictory to our present orthodoxy to fit into human current thinking? Dare we think? Dare we actually say that this is what we don't fully understand about ourselves, about life, and yes, about God, the understanding of which could change everything? That for sure is a big dare. End of chapter.
Couldn't get off of mute. Thank you, Linda. I think that I'm just going to mention vaguely here that I was just about an hour ago, I was in a different meeting, and one of the things that was talked about was what does God, mean to you? And it's interesting because there's no wrong answers, especially when it's pointed, what does God mean to you? And this question that says, the understanding of which would change everything. I thought about that line while I was in this meeting, because not that my way is the right way, it's merely a different way. But I was thinking about the fact that if people, and I'm speaking in general terms, if people would say to themselves, if I open my mind to a certain way to keep things, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, like the last sentence of this chapter is, that is for sure a big dare. And I would like to see people, and just because I want to see it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I think it's really important that we do reconsider our belief systems and try to have that open mind where you say, the understanding of which would change everything. And people have to be able to say, yes, I'm willing to take that big dare and see where that takes us. Over. Anybody else have something they want to say?
There's one big problem with that. These are very curious questions, very good questions, but it also has to do with one's belief system and one's lineage and what's been handed down to them, what they believe and what they think, and the good old ego of me, I. Most problems, I think, the existence is that we're selfish and self-centered. So it's like, am I willing to give up what I want or what I need so that somebody else can have what they need? That's a whole new world paradigm for shifting from the mind, from the ego, to the heart. And in this world, we haven't been taught that the heart of the matter is the heart of the matter, that living in your hearts and that love and that brotherhood and all these idealistic, they're idealistic as opposed to being the reality that should have already been there. Somehow we became separated from each other, thinking that I'm here and you're there. It's kind of like your mother saying, eat your food because there are people starving, in China or something like that. It's, and as a kid you say, well, I don't know what eating my food, how that's going to help them. But it's a matter of really needing to shift the whole paradigm to be able to see through it's a different viewpoint. It's what matters, what really matters to the human soul, and people choosing actually one over the other.
That's a really good point. And what I think about is if we go to that place of gratitude and not the place of let me judge what you're thinking or vice versa, and I think this is how we learn. And that comment you made about our parents saying things like, or the kids saying, what difference does it make if I eat my food for the people starving in China? But to me, that's the gift of gratitude, being able to say, I am grateful for this food, and I would like everybody to have a toilet, and that's just a off-the-cuff comment. Because I think for most of us, we want people to be able to have especially the bare necessities. And we just need a way to figure out, we need a way to voice how we get from here to there. Over.
Well, here's one other thought, though. One I'm always amazed at is when there is a disaster or a tragedy, like 911, like what's happening in the Bahamas, how people all come together, or something happens in a community, like in snow country or something like that. People come together in such a way to help each other. They don't even think. It's like they would run into a burning house to save their neighbor. There's that part of us. But other than that, it just isn't in our blueprint. Or I'm talking about, anyway, over.
Well, I'm going to add something here, and I've told this story before, but it's been a long time. There was a gentleman who lived in somewhere like, I want to say Tennessee or Kentucky, and his county had decided that in order for you to be protected by the fire department, you needed to pay $75 a year into a fund to help get, the firefighters paid. And when the fire department showed up and this guy's house was on fire and he hadn't paid the $75, the chief of the fire department said, do not turn the hoses on this guy's house. He hasn't paid for our services. And I thought to myself, how could one, I don't get that thought, but I remember my then husband was saying, I guess I would have lost my job that night because I would have said, you can tell me whatever you want to tell me, but I'm not going to sit here and watch this guy's house burn. And even some of the neighbors came over and said, here's his $75, I'll pay for it. And the chief said, you can't do that. It's just going to be the way it is. And I remember posting that on the Humanities Team Facebook page saying, where's the oneness? And this is age-old question, even for those of us who've been reading these books for a long time, is how can you stand by? I mean, you wouldn't stand by and watch a child drown. Most of us wouldn't. You wouldn't stand by and for this guy, he wouldn't let his house burn to the ground. You do everything you can to help out. And given that I'm in this recovery hospital for my broken hip, there are all sorts of different people that are living in this facility, everything from hospice to injuries to depression, whatever their issue is. And people want to help each other. I mean, somebody will get up in the middle of the night and say, help me, help me. And I'm flying out of my bed like I'm the little old lady in the shoe, the mother of all these people. And I'm saying, I'll be right there. And you just don't know. We need to treat each other better, obviously. And we can't just rely on, well, they're crying wolf, because what about the time that they're not crying wolf? So I think that's part of the reason we need to come together with each other and take care of each other. Over.
You kind of addressed the point I wanted to make, because Anne, I think, said it's not in our blueprint, talking about how people often have that selfish mentality. And I think it is in our blueprint. And it's kind of what Neil said, because of the thing where we do come together to help people in those major issues. I remember seeing this little kid on the subway. It was like a school group. And there was a bunch of kids, and then there was this, person on hard times, probably homeless, who passed by asking for money. And one of the kids wanted to give him money, and he felt like embarrassed and ashamed for wanting to help. And the teacher said, don't feel embarrassed about that. And I thought, I think, because I remember feeling the same when I was little, that I wanted to help people, but there was this shame attached, like we're supposed to just, let people suffer because somehow they earned it or they made their bed or something. And I do think that some of that callousness is learned rather than innate. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Ove.
The other thing is, I was raised with the philosophy of from my family of origin, was to mind my own business. So it was like, you'll see somebody in distress or something like that. And I'm going with the negative. I mean, I'm going with the devil's advocate today, I guess. And you'll cross the street and walk on the other side, so you don't have to deal with what you see you're coming up to, because you don't want to get involved. So it's like there's a lot of shifts of our mentality. I guess I just stand back to the differences. Are we in our head or are we in our heart? And I'm going to over.
That's a really good point. And I'm sorry for the noise in the background. Oh,
Oh boy.
I know. Linda, you
Oh,
want to?
there was one other thing I wanted to say. When you're talking about the facility that you're in, Nanette, that's like the facility that Daryl's in. It's so hard to not pass judgment because it really is horrendous. And I'm watching how the aides sit there and they don't help out where they could. And you hear people moaning and screaming and wanting to go this way or that way. There's one woman who sat in the hall for like a half an hour screaming for somebody to help her, stuff like that. But you have to be careful about how you judge, because there was this one lady that was screaming that she was thirsty. She was thirsty. She was thirsty. And I wanted to help her. So what I did was I asked permission if I could go get her some fruit juice. Can I give her some fruit juice? And I'm really glad I did, because it turns out that she had a liquid problem when she had diabetes and stuff like that. And the fruit juice had sugar in it. And she had already had too much liquid. And so in other words, they weren't just denying her. She was just hollering and hollering, but it was that they couldn't give it to her. They weren't just ignoring her. So I just wanted to throw that out, because we never really know what the situation is.
That's a really good point, and it's a good reminder to all of us that before you act, you should be finding out things like, are they diabetic? Are they, whatever the situation, without saying I need to be in your business, but just say I want to make sure this is okay before I do anything, because there could be very, like you say, and there could be very good reasons why you shouldn't be doing something to help somebody. And we don't all know those answers. So we need to be able to use our voices and not be afraid to ask, is it okay if I give this person fruit juice? Just because we don't know the answers. Over.
Can I say something? No? Somebody else is talking? Okay. Now, you are reminding me of something when you are talking now, because also as when I was young, both as a child and a teenager, I always wanted to change humanity. I wanted to support. I didn't know. I didn't like to see suffering. I don't know what this in me was. Always that I wanted to help kids in school that suffered. I came to their rescue and so on. But I remember when I was working at hospital when I was a teenager in summers, after 18 to 21 or something. In summers, I was working in hospitals, and it was on where people were lying for a long time, and there were many elderly. And when I was working, we had to clean and do all these practical things, and we were not allowed actually to talk to the people. And I wanted to get in contact. And when they talked to me, I stopped talking, and I was not allowed to do that. We should just do practical things. And I remember that I stayed after my work had finished and went around and talked to all the ones that tried to talk to me. And it was such a difference, because no one had time for them really, to listen to them, to be with them. And for me, that was what gave me the meaning to be there. So I think it's so rational in many ways, instead of connecting in a deeper level. And I got so much feedback from those people. I went around, from relatives to them came and talked to me. Oh, my mother is so happy that you are coming. And there were different situations. I have forgotten that. I just was reminded about that time. I was shocked about how it was in these hospitals. Yeah, over. Thank you.
I have one other thing that I need to share that this has brought up, which is Darryl wasn't getting the attention and care he needed, so I brought in hospice because they provide different services. And what happened was that they had a volunteer that came in to spend time with him. And what he needed was, since he doesn't have good balance and he can't walk by himself, they keep him in a chair all day, and he goes nuts because he wants to walk. and he needs somebody to walk with, and nobody there has time to take out to walk him around the place. And so volunteers come in, but there's a no-touch policy. This is our generation. There's a no-touch policy. So a volunteer is not allowed to put a hand in any way on a person. So they couldn't walk with Daryl because if Daryl was to fall or lose his balance, they weren't allowed to touch him to stabilize him. Or they weren't allowed to walk with him and just hold his arm or have him hold on to them. And I found that extremely upsetting, but it also somehow seems very relative to what we're talking about, because look at where our society has gone with touch. And touch is a human need. And it's like there's just a society now where touching is improper most of the time. A lot of the time, some of the time. Over.
Agreed. And
So that's because we don't know how to touch each other properly.
I agree. And I think that goes back to something Anne said, and I think Mary, just ask. Because there very well could be a good reason. And even in this place that I'm staying, there's elderly women who have been assaulted in nursing homes. And I was trying to help this woman cross a threshold, and I put my hand out to her, and well, she took off swinging at me. She did not want me touching her. So now I realize if I want to do something like that, I need to say, would you like my help? Instead of just, thinking that that person wants my help. And I think that's a good rule for a lot of questions we have in life about other people. They may not want our help. Over.
The other thing that I wanted to say was about that head versus heart divide, which is true and real. But I don't think that it's natural, like the way that we're all in the head instead of the heart. I think that when we're born, we start out in the heart, and that gets kind of beat out of us, not literally necessarily, but socialized out of us through those things of like, well, you don't want to get involved in other people's problems and cross the street and stuff. And like, I think that that's why when the horrible tragedies happen, we all go right to the heart, because they put us in touch with, who we really are beyond the socialization. And we're definitely living in a society that gives way too much value to the head and not nearly enough to the heart. And hopefully that's changing. But I just want to address that a little. Thank you. Over.
Agreed, and good point, Mary. And, even somebody was saying about, I think it was Linda, we're not taught about touching each other and what's appropriate and what's not. And we want to be careful that we're not making people be afraid of that kind of thing. At the same time, we don't know everybody's story, so we don't know how they'll react. So I think using our verbal skills is really important. Over.
I just shared an article on Facebook the other day that talked about a study that I'm trying to remember now. I think it was that the military had done, and they discovered that if they tested children, I forget, they were very young children, like something like 80% of the children tested at genius level. And then if you test them later, like when they're 10, now they've lost a lot of their geniusness. And if you test them again when they're like 15, most of them are no longer anywhere close to being genius. The people didn't change. So what changed? How could they all have started out, the majority of them being geniuses when they were little? And it's what society does to them that removes that ability, that creativity, that the way that we look at things. It's drummed out of us. It's beaten out of us. It's taught away. And we have to remember and learn all of this and stop that, you know, but that's what the process we're in right now, I think, is society is beginning to wake up to where we are and where we really should be, and where it would work, to use Neil's terms, what would work versus what doesn't work, which is where we are now. We've got a lot of what doesn't work going on.
That's a really good point, Linda. And I think that when you're around people that you don't know, that our verbal skills are just as important as the touching skills. And if we are able to, you know, voice things so that people don't feel threatened, that we can make a big difference by respecting somebody by asking them questions. Over.
Hi. I know I'm talking a lot today. Very unusual for me, but I have to tell my bunny story because it's so they did a study about cholesterol. And what happened was there were these 3 groups of bunnies, and one had a very low cholesterol diet, one had a regular diet, and one was extremely high in cholesterol. And I'll make this a really short version of it. And so when they tested it, they couldn't figure out why in this one group, one of the bunnies, the groups of bunnies that were on a very high cholesterol diet tested lower than the low cholesterol diets, and they repeated the test. And the bottom line is that they found that the woman that took care of that group of rabbits would come in and she would pet them during, she would come in to feed them and she would pet them and she would tell them what good bunnies they were, and she would just stroke them and pet them and talk to them positively, and they digested all of that, all the high cholesterol. And over.
This is where the open mind, I think, comes into play, because we never know, what the situation is. But I think if you extend your kindness through voice, in your case, through touch with animals, but I would want to be warned if an animal was rabid, don't stick your hand in that cage, blah, 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 for this reason. That's just part of the communication skills that I think we lack. Over. Okay, anybody else? Okay, Linda, you want to go ahead and read a little more?
Sure. Chapter 20, The Dare. It was George Bernard Shaw who observed, quote, all great truths begin as blasphemies, close quote. If we accept and embrace the combined declaration that all human beings are spiritual beings manifesting physically and one essence manifesting individually, we are faced with the logical, if daring, conclusion that all of us are, in fact, part of each other. For some, that's challenging enough. But the logic extends further. The decision would necessarily also declare that if there is only a singular essence in all of the universe, and if we see divinity as that originating and essential essence, then all of us must be, as well, a part of what we call God. This then is what is meant by choosing God. By deciding to divine and experience ourselves both as a spiritual being and as one being, we are choosing to declare that divinity exists in us, as us, and through us. And that is daring indeed. For some, such a declaration would seem to border on blasphemy, or to cross that border. It can be extremely difficult for some people to imagine or accept that God and we are one, that each of us is, in effect, a singularization of the singularity, an individuation of divinity. So I want to offer an analogy that helped me, when I first encountered it, bring this huge idea down to something my mind could more easily grapple with. Consider that we are to God as a wave is to the ocean. The wave rises from the ocean and expresses itself as the ocean in individuated form, and then recedes back into the ocean to arise and express again in another way in another moment. The ocean is never not within the wave. It is the wave, manifesting as an expression of itself. In the same way, we arise from divinity and express ourselves as the divine in individuated form, and then we recede back into the divine to arise and express again in another way on another day. The divine is never not within us. It is us manifesting as an expression of itself. These can be useful metaphysical constructions, but frankly, I needed more. I've never been willing to swallow conjectures whole unless I felt that they had at least some possibility of having a basis in fact, some at least partial grounding in reality as we know it. So I sought to bring a little science into all of this, just to balance the equation between metaphysics and physics. What I found is that, quote, reality as we know it, close quote, or at least as I knew it, turns out to have very little to do with reality as it actually is. Physicist and systems theorist Fritjof Capra tells us that, quote, at the subatomic level, the solid material objects of classical physics dissolve into wave-like patterns of probabilities, and these patterns ultimately do not represent probabilities of things, but rather probabilities of interconnections. A careful analysis of the process of observation in atomic physics has shown that the subatomic particles have no meaning as isolated entities, but can only be understood as interconnections between the preparation of an experiment and a subsequent measurement. Quantum theory thus reveals a basic oneness of the universe. It shows that we cannot decompose the world into independently existing smallest units. As we penetrate into matter, nature does not show us any isolated basic building blocks, but rather appears as a complicated web of relations between the various parts of the whole. Capra, 2000, edition of The Tao of Physics, an exploration of the parallels between modern physics and Eastern mysticism, first published in 1975, page 68. That was enough for me, but I didn't stop there. Excited by what I learned, I quickly undertook a layman's study of physics. Nothing academically deep, mind you. A book here, a book over there over a few months, but sufficient to convince me that even contemporary science has declared that everything is one essence, manifesting individually. All of this brought up for me an interesting question. What is the connection between cosmology and theology? Are those who embrace the idea that they are an expression of the divine rightly accused of heresy? Are they properly labeled apostates? This was not unimportant to me, so I did a little theological research as well. I wanted to see what religious and spiritual sources had to say on the subject. I placed what I found in a small booklet titled Recreating Yourself. I'm reprinting that research here because I discovered, as I had imagined must be true, that part of what humanity's old cultural story was telling us in the past is that the new cultural story arising out of humanity's daring decision is telling us now. Here's some of what I found. Isaiah 41:23. True the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that ye are gods, yea, do good, or do evil, that we may be dismayed and behold it together. Psalms 82:6. I have said, gods ye are, and sons of the Most High, all of you. John 10:34. Jesus answered them, is it not written in your law, I said ye are gods? Sri Swami Krishnananda Saraswami Maharishi, April 25, 1922 to November 23, 2001, a Hindu saint, said this: God exists. There is only one God. The essence of man is God. According to Buddhism, there ultimately is no such thing as a self that is independent from the rest of the universe, the doctrine of anatta, any more than there is a wave that is independent of the ocean. Also, if I understand certain Buddhist schools of thought correctly, humans return to the earth in subsequent lifetimes in one of 6 forms, the last of which are called devas, which is variously translated as gods or deities. Meanwhile, the ancient Chinese discipline of Taoism speaks of embodiment and pragmatism, engaging practice to actualize the natural order within themselves. Taoists believe that man is a microcosm for the universe. Hermeticism is a set of philosophical and religious beliefs or gnosis based on primarily upon the Hellenistic Egyptian pseudo-pharaoh writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. Hermetism teaches that there is a transcendent God, the all, or one cause, in which we and the entire universe participate. The concept was first laid out in the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, in the famous words, quote, that which is below corresponds to that which is above, and that which is above corresponds to that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. And in Sufism, an esoteric form of Islam, the teaching there is no God but God was long ago changed to there is nothing but God, which would make us, well, God. You might find it instructive and fascinating to go online and go to Wikipedia, the source to which I owe my appreciation for much of the above information. But what of those who look towards the words of Jesus for their counsel? Would they find the idea that God and we are one to be heretical? This is also not an unimportant question. So I looked more deeply into Jesus' words for guidance. End of chapter. You know, this next chapter is really short.
Okay, go ahead and read that.
I think I should read the next chapter.
Okay.
So chapter 21, the guidance. The words attributed to Jesus have become extremely important in the lives of billions the world over. So I wanted to find out if he was reported to have made any statements touching on this spiritually revolutionary idea of our all being one. Using the Bible as my source, I found this statement, quote, "And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also might be sanctified through the truth. Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they may also be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me, and the glory which thou gavest me I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one." John 17:19-22. I have concluded that Jesus lovingly understood our difficulty in believing that we are a part of God, part of God's very body. Yet Jesus did believe this of himself. It was therefore a simple matter and a marvelous inspiration for him to invite those who could not imagine themselves to be a part of God, to imagine themselves to be, in the very real sense, joined with him. Jesus had already declared himself to be a part of God, and if we could simply believe that we were a part of the body of Christ, we would, by extension, necessarily be a part of God, whether we could find it in ourselves to declare that or not. So it was that he said, quote, "I am the vine, ye are the branches," describing for us our oneness in him. And here is what the author of 1 Corinthians 12-6, Apostle Paul, gave us. "For as the body is one, and hath many members, and all the members are of that one body, being many are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we are all baptized into one body, whether we be Jews or Gentiles, whether we be bound or free, and have all been made to drink into one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot shall say, because I am not the hand, I am not the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear shall say, because I am not the eye, I am not the body, is therefore not of the body?" Jesus must have emphasized this point over and over, because every record of his teachings and the commentaries upon them in the Bible contain many references to this relationship. String just a few of these separate references together, and we have an extraordinary revelation. I and my Father are one. John 10:30. And the glory that which thou givest me, I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. John 17:22. I in them, and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in one. John 17:23. That the love wherewith thou hast loved me may be in them, and I in them. John 17:26. So we, being many, are one body in Christ, and every one members one of another. Romans 12:5. Now he that planteth and he that watereth are one. 1 Corinthians 3:8. For we being many are one bread and one body, for we are all partakers of that one bread. 1 Corinthians 10:17. But now are they many members, yet but one body. 1 Corinthians 12:20. You can't get much clearer than that. End of chapter.
Thank you, Linda. Does anybody want to comment on this before we close up the call?
I just love that message about oneness, because that's how we can develop to peace and love on the planet. And it's so good, and that it connects to all backgrounds. I mean, that's all religions in the depths unite. It's on the surface that they separate, but I completely agree. That touched my heart deeply. I love to listen to that. Over.
That's a good point, Dima. Thank you for sharing that with us. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here, even though we've got 2.5 minutes left. I've got the house cleaners in here trying to clean up, and that's going to just create a lot of noise. But we can discuss this, and I'm going to go ahead, not this moment, but I'm going to read the next chapter, the ideas, for next time. Does anybody have anything you want to say before we close the call?
Thanks for being here, everybody.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes. Love you.
Have a good week.
All right. You too. And we'll see each other next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Love. Bye-bye.